Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're excited to be hosting this webinar today, looking at the inside of the 2025 Global Inclusion Conference and talking about what's new and what's to expect this year. We are so excited to be going to Minneapolis, Minnesota this year for the conference, and really looking forward to seeing what is happening in the international education world. So for today in our webinar, we are joined by Andrew Gordon, the CEO and founder of DA Global Access Network. And my name is Victoria Pope, and I am the Manager of Membership and Programming for DA Global Access Network. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew very quickly, just in case he wants to give a brief introduction of himself a little bit longer, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Victoria, and good afternoon, good morning, evening, wherever you all may be joining. And as Victoria mentioned, I'm Andrew Gordon. I'm the CEO and founder of DA Global Access Network, or just DA Global. And looking forward to today's chat. As we know that in this past February, we had a rebrand from Diversity Abroad to DA Global Access Network, and our conference rebranded from the Global Inclusion Conference to the Global Impact Conference. Later on, Victoria will mention how we still continue to have our Global Inclusion Regional Summit, but some differences between the Regional Summit and the Global Impact Global Impact Conference. Excuse me. So excited to dive into this discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, Andrew. And as we get started today, I just want to go through a brief agenda of our call. So with this call, we'll be talking about the evolution of the Global Impact Conference. Where did it start? How has it changed? And where is it going? What is the impact behind global impact? Because impact is not only a word, but it's a spirit, it's a body. It's a commitment that we hope is embodied by all of the attendees who will be attending the Global Impact Conference. Next, we'll have a little bit of a focus on the types of content and the elements that are kind of different this year versus other years and how they're expanding to encompass new things. And then finally, we'll open the floor for some audience Q&A. As we begin this call, I would just like to say that this call is being recorded. So if you are uncomfortable with that, just an FYI. And then also that this is meant to be a brief overview, and we hope to welcome more conversation with the audience Q&A at the end. So with that, I want to get right into the bulk of this, looking at what is new in looking at the evolution of the Global Impact Conference. So Andrew, if I can ask you, as you've seen DA Global kind of change and grow throughout the years, how does the 2025 Global Impact Conference build on DA Global's legacy of centering inclusion and access in global education?
Great question, Victoria. Thanks for that. So if you think of the evolution of our organization from Diversity Abroad to DA Global, it wasn't just a name change. I think obviously name change is the name and brand is probably the thing that hits at first. When we dive a little bit deeper into our work and how we talk about DA Global, is that the expansion of our work is really moving beyond discussing diversity, equity, inclusion on its own, and looking at how we're talking about inclusive global education as it pertains to global education's impact on students, on student academic achievement, on preparing students for their careers, and on institutional impact, institutional organizational impact, both locally as well as the places where we have footprints around the world. And so I would say one of the big differences is that the Global Impact Conference more intentionally brings in themes of student academic achievement, student career readiness, institutional effectiveness, institutional impact, into the conversation of global education. And so this is the impact, if you will, is just that the question of how is global education having an impact on these areas, and that's deeply rooted in our philosophy that global education in and of itself isn't enough just to talk about the importance of it. We have to talk about how it's having impact on these broader themes that are that these themes that are really moving higher education as a whole. And an opportunity for us to be more intentional of making sure that we're inviting our colleagues who work in student academic advising or student success, those that work in student affairs, career development. We've always, I would say, the Global Inclusion Conference already had a rich history of having professionals who work in diverse equity inclusion attend, and building on that, those professionals continuing to have a space at the the Global Impact Conference. And then obviously across the spectrum of international education, those who work in education abroad, those working with our international students, as well as those who are looking at areas like employment and sense of belonging for professionals. So I would say in many ways, it's just building upon what has already been there, and being more intentional about hitting on themes that are very much in line with higher education's broad goals. And so in choosing the word impact, as you mentioned, Victoria, yes, the definition, the pure definition of the word impact, but I also encourage everyone to look at how we have built impact to be an acronym, and what that acronym stands for, and its role. And I'm actually happy to kind of talk through what the acronym stands for, impact. The I stands for inclusion and innovation, the M for mentorship and support, P for personal and professional growth, A for academic and career success, C for collaboration, and then T for transformative leadership. And so all of those are themes that we build into how we're looking at the Global Impact Conference and its role. So while yes, the term changed from inclusion to impact, it by no means means that, or no means, if you will, is an indication that we're moving away from inclusion. I mean, inclusion is in that first I, inclusion and innovation, but also bringing in other themes that we feel strengthens the role, strengthens the argument, strengthens the reason for inclusive global education as a whole.
Thank you, Andrew. I think as you were speaking, and maybe it's a little bit silly of me, but when you were talking about inviting all of these other offices and people from these other departments that are outside of the traditional diversity, equity, inclusion offices, it really came to mind the phrase "it takes a village," and so it really is important to have the voices and collaboration from all of these different departments outside of DEI, the DEI offices that are on campuses to really make a mark in the students' journey towards success. And not only those students that are domestic students, their home is there on the campuses, but the students who are both inbound, making sure that they feel included and have belonging. And not only that, but also have ways to succeed once they finish their program. Because a lot of, I think, sometimes we have the moment where students come in from another country and they land into their host country, and maybe all the support disappears, and then they go back and they're just like, oh, what do I do next? So it's really exciting to know that the Global Impact Conference is really looking to support students at all parts of their journey, in their kind of global aspirations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. And so you shared a little bit about what does impact mean? Because I think a lot of us, maybe we looked at the Global Impact Conference and we didn't think of impact as an acronym, but it is an acronym and it stands for something. And the impact is not only on the students, but it's also on the professionals that are assisting these students. And so I just wonder if you could maybe chat to us a little bit about how will Global Impact support new professionals as well as seasoned leaders in the field of global education.
Yeah, so I'll start the question, answering that question by keeping in mind that the foundation, if you will, of both DA Global as well as the Global Impact Conference are DA Global's four pillars. And then the four pillars are just the four areas, our four areas of focus, which are outbound mobility, international student success, global engagement at home, and then the one that's really important for this question is success for global professionals. And so when we look at success for global professionals, what we're looking at is how do we recruit, retain, support professionals in the field of international education. And that is in line with our philosophy that in order for our field to have the most impact, we had to have the best people working here. And so, how are we ensuring that our offices are places where a professional from any background can enter their career in international education, be supported, have that sense of belonging, and thrive, whether that's at an institution, whether at an organization, or otherwise. And so one of the areas really since its inception that, again, something I'm very proud of with the Global Impact Conference is that while, yes, so much of our content is focused on how we're looking at and supporting students, there is also a tremendous amount of content and events that are focused on how are we supporting the success of professionals in our field? How are we recruiting high quality folks that bring diverse perspectives and global experience into our field? One of my favorite events at the conference is the Women of Color Leadership Lunch, and it's something that we launched several years ago, a unique program to DA the Global Impact Conference. But again, just a space of looking at for the women of color who are working in the field of international education, how are we creating very unique spaces to discuss both challenges and opportunities in leadership? And so that's just one example, but I would say that the networking that happens, the connection, the community that's built at the Global Impact Conference is more than just how am I doing my specific job better in supporting the success of students. Is also how am I feeding myself as a professional? How are we supporting each other as a community of professionals? And how, as the field continues to evolve, and how we better support students, are we also involving in how we're supporting in both the personal and the career aspirations of the professionals who work in our space?
I really appreciate that you brought up the Women of Color lunch because uh, I think that has been a lunch that in the years that I have been with DA has always is sold out. There's always the seats are completely full and people are always wanting to come in. And so I think it's really important to note that this is a space that as we move from global inclusion to global impact, something broader, the space is still open and we invite people into it. I think maybe at some point people might believe that these spaces will no longer have a place in the Global Impact Conference, but I think we're just expanding those. So I'm so excited that you mentioned that the Women of Color lunch continues to be a highlight. And that kind of like brings me to my next kind of question for you is as you know, this year in the US has been a particularly challenging one for education, especially international education as a whole. And so, looking at that, and as we go into the Global Impact Conference, I just wonder if you can speak to a little bit how the conference is going to address the evolving challenges and opportunities, perhaps, facing the global education field today, both in the US and also abroad, because what's happening here is maybe is going to roll into other countries as well.
Yeah. And this again, I think goes back to the intentionality of using the word impact of the conference. For us, international education cannot be separate to the goals of higher education as a whole, regardless of which country we're talking about. So some of the challenges that we're facing and that higher education is facing around student retention, student success, policymakers and parents saying, "Hey, what's the value here?" Or employers saying, "You know what, we need to make sure that students don't just have a degree, but they're ready to come into the workforce." When I think of the opportunities we have with the Global Impact Conference, is taking a step back and asking what is global education, international education's role in helping higher education achieve its goals so that we're in line with expectations of of governments, of policymakers, of families, of foundations, of our boards, and otherwise. So really, this is our opportunity to, I think, the Global Impact Conference to more closely align the work of international education with the goals and well, just that the goals of higher education as a whole. And so that's I would say from a shift, kind of going back to maybe one of your original questions, is us just again being I probably the two eyes that you'll hear me use a lot is impact and intentionality. And so really being intentional about how we're framing global education and how we're looking at its impact on broad themes and goals of the higher education sector.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as you talk about themes, that kind of takes me into my next question for you, and that is the what is new and what are some changes that are happening with the Global Impact Conference for 2025? What can attendees expect as far as like different themes that sessions might go on? As you might recall, we have several new s- themes and tracks that are included in our call for proposals for this year. One of those being experiential learning for students, legislation and policy, which is a huge topic here, student engagement, and then of course we have our topic of emerging trends, which is kind of a catch-all for those things that come up as we come into things.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, Victoria. So if you look at the themes as a whole, what we took a step back and said is, you know, who are the different stakeholders? Who's part of this broad ecosystem of international education? So yes, policy that impacts. I think we're probably all seeing that right now. Policy impacts what happens in international education, what we can do, sometimes what we can't do. And so, in broadening in some ways the scope of the Global Impact Conference, that has given us an opportunity to also look in broadening who are the stakeholders that should be coming to the table. What are the themes that we should be talking about? Um, I would say that the connection of global education to career readiness is going to be a theme that we continue to see. But also at the same time, you know, really connecting global education to what does it mean to be more civically involved? And how are we leveraging global education as a tool to build better citizens of given nations or better citizens of the world as well? We is I think very easy and maybe at times seems maybe a little transactional to talk about the academic benefits or the career benefits of global education because obviously that's something that's very and top and center on the mind of so many. And this higher education is an investment, and so that should you know it's not something that should be easily dismissed, but is also an opportunity to help students and particularly young people to engage in different cultures, to have to put themselves in a position where they're able to, if done right, develop deeper empathy and otherwise. So, you know, I think it's looking going back to impact. You know, how do these different parts of the broad higher education ecosystem, sorry, the broad international education ecosystem um, how do they play into the you know the impact that we're having within higher education and beyond?
Yeah, totally. It reminds me of how I came on my own journey within international ed and even ending up here with DA. I think without the global experiential learning that I had when I was in university, I definitely would not be here today. So it definitely impacts you while you're in university, but definitely while you're out of university as well. Another thing that I wanted to see if you could touch on is usually at the past global inclusion conferences, we have our awards gala. And so this year, I'm really excited to have the newly debuted Impact Awards, Impact going with the acronym that we previously shared with us. But within those awards, we have some exciting new categories for our institution and organizations for nominations for that. Um, we have an exciting new one that's called International Education Employer of the Year, and then some updated categories that focus on outbound mobility and global global engagement at home. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit more about Impact Awards and that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Impact Awards is just that. It's an opportunity for us to recognize individuals, organizations, institutions that are leveraging global education to have impact. And as you mentioned, kind of having that acronym in mind as a whole. So, the DA Global Impact Awards are, I think, unique from that standpoint. Um, and the new award that you mentioned, and I'm incredibly excited about it, which is the International Education Employer of the Year. It goes back to something you asked me a few moments ago, which is around, the role that we're talking about, or sorry, not the role, but the importance of also including professional success into these discussions at the conference. And so, this new award category will allow us to recognize um, employers, whether it's at an institution or organization, that are building offices and entities and organizations where folks from any background can come in and thrive and feel that they can belong and be successful, and that they're demonstrating that in a variety of ways. And so it's something that we think is somewhat unique in our field, but something that's incredibly important as well. So definitely the Impact Awards are open through June 20th. So going to encourage everyone to submit and to be recognized, because while yes, there are challenges that we're all facing, the opportunities are there, and plenty of institutions and individuals and organizations who are still finding success despite the challenges.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to add to your comment about them being open now and the nominations and people recognizing those doing work in the field. I want to add that we're not only recognizing our colleagues that are doing work in the field, but you can also recognize yourself. So sometimes I think our colleagues around us don't see the work that we're doing, and we know the work that we're doing. So it's really important to self-recognize and nominate yourself for that impact award. Um, so as we kind of wrap up the end of this conversation, I just wanted to launch one final question to you, Andrew, and that is global impact for 2025. Yes, that's great. But what are you looking forward to in the months and years that follow this first inaugural Global Impact Conference?
Gosh, Victoria, I would say that I my vision, and I think our vision as an organization for Global Impact 2025, is that it has the same impact that each of the prior global inclusion conferences has had, and that is inspiring our colleagues to continue the work of expanding access to global education, to making sure global education has an impact on students of all backgrounds. For colleagues to come and feel a sense of community, a sense of connection, a sense of like, I'm not the only one that's committed and working on this, and that even as we face different challenges for a variety of external challenges, having that sense of community, and I hope everyone comes away with a deeper appreciation for the role that global education plays. It's not just this transactional get student from point A to point B process international students coming in. It's the magic of it, the power of it is so much more than that. And I think walking away and knowing that the work that we do day in and day out that has impact on students, on their families, on the communities they come from, and impact at our institutions, and the role, the impact, if you will, that our institutions have both locally, wherever local may be for you, and globally as well. So I think inspired. I think leaving away inspired for what's next.
I love it. Adding another I to our I for impact, innovation, inspired, intention. I think I'm really looking forward to Global Impact 2025. Thank you a lot for sharing some thoughts with us, Andrew, about what we can expect for this 2025 Global Impact Conference. With that, I want to just turn our attention to some of the things that we talked about and some upcoming opportunities with DA Global Access Network, not only with the Global Impact Conference, but outside of that. We still have our Global Inclusion Regional Summit. The Global Inclusion Regional Summit is a summit that takes place outside of the United States, and looking at what inclusive work and practices are happening outside the US. How are other countries and other regions approaching student mobility? And this year, we're happy to host the Global Inclusion Regional Summit in Barcelona, Spain. It will be happening from June 25th to 26th, and the registration is still open for that now. The call for proposals for the Global Impact Conference are currently open. So if you're listening into this webinar and you feel inspired, taking the word from Andrew after hearing the things that you can expect and what is new at the Global Impact Conference, and you want to add your voice to that conversation, we encourage you to submit a call for proposal. The submission application portal will close on May 9th. The submission is quite easy. It takes about maybe 10 minutes. And then we go from there. The next opportunity that I would like to talk about is the Global Impact Conference in itself. Registration is currently opened. It just opened yesterday. And so early bird registration is open, and there are discounts specifically for member organizations. So go and take advantage of those special rates. And then finally, the Global Impact Awards. Nominations are open for that, and they will close on June 20th. And like we mentioned before, I think the best person to recognize the work that you're doing in the field sometimes is yourself. So don't shy away from doing self nominations, as well as nominating your colleagues in your organizations that are making waves in the global education field. And so with that, we hope that you all stay in touch. You have our website and our email here, as well as LinkedIn. We look forward to seeing you in future events and opportunities. And thank you for joining us today. Take care. Bye bye.